Hey folks, welcome to another edition of Striper 101. This is kind of part 3 to the history of the striped bass in the Colorado River, but this is more or less called this a prequel. So I just want to tell everybody it's a long one, but wait till the end because everything that we're talking about, you're going to actually see. We brought in Mike Cavalero, the biologist, brought in actual larvae, the quagga mussel, talks about a bunch of the other bugs that he brought in actually from the sample traps that are pulled out from the river that are monitored. So again, this is so important for fishing that you understand where it all begins and the health of this river, starting from the beginning of the food chain. We're going to have another episode after this that's going to go into the bait fish and what the striped bass are feeding on. But let's go ahead and start from the very, very, very beginning with the caddis fly, the larva, and a lot of the other bugs and invertebrates that are being eaten, which starts the food chain to this healthy river that we have. So please like, share, subscribe, and enjoy. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.
This fish report is brought to you by River King Tackle and Outfitters in Bullhead City, Arizona, located on the 95. Also brought to you by ArizonaWaterfowl.com, Arizona's #1 waterfowl guide service.
Hi, I'm Mike with River King Tackle and Outfitters here in Bullhead City, Arizona. I am here with Mike Cavalero, who is in the city of Bullhead, works for the city of Bullhead as an entomologist and the biologist out here on the river. And we're going to talk about the Caddis Fly program, the trout stocking program, and the fishery as a whole, and what Mike does here and how it ties in. And so enjoy the program. Remember to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep doing some of these docu-series that we're doing. We really enjoy putting them out, and we appreciate all the support. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, Mike, you want to tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about the Caddis Fly program?
Yeah. So my name is Michael Cavalero. I have a PhD in environmental toxicology, where I've studied insect ecology for the last about 7 years now. Previous to that, I got a master's and a bachelor's in biology, all on aquatic ecology, ranging from fishery studies to aquatic insect studies. And in my capacity here at the city, I'm the municipal entomologist and pest abatement manager, where I operate the mosquito control program within city limits. I help coordinate the black fly control program with Clark County Vector Control in Nevada, and then I also run the Caddis Fly abatement research program. So the primary goal of the Caddis Fly abatement research program overall is to try to come up with an integrated pest management strategy to suppress these nuisance caddis flies. The river here is an ecological anomaly in that it has nuisance caddis flies. So nuisance caddis flies are not commonly found in river systems. They are indicators of high water quality. They filter out and recycle nutrients in the environment, and they are an incredibly important food base for a lot of fish and other secondary consumers, birds and bats and things like that. But in areas where they are of nuisance levels, they can cause a lot of quality of life issues. Some folks will get dermal reactions to the hairs on their bodies. But overall, we're trying to look at different biological control elements like stocking trout, different cultural changes or physical changes where we can manipulate the flows with the dam, and then do some exploration with different compounds that may repel them from homes. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I do for the city and what we're trying to accomplish.
Awesome. So last year there was a lot of controversy on lowering of the river, and there was a lot of rumors of everything's going to die in the river. It's going to destroy the fishing. It's I heard so many that even I myself got a little fired up at one point, and that is actually how we met, with what was going to happen to the river and what they were going to do with the water flows. Can you explain to us that entailed, with that initial time when we were going to drop the river. Why was that river being dropped, and what was the goal with dropping that river in regards to the caddis fly and the caddis fly larva, and how did it affect the fishing or not affect the fish or the fishing?
Yeah, so in 2020, local government leaders, businesses got together with folks at the Bureau of Reclamation's River Ops team, who operate the Lower Colorado River Basin and basically manage the water budgets and operations for the Hoover, Davis, and Parker dams. And they put their heads together and thought, hey, we need a multi-stakeholder group to discuss flows, how it impacts recreation, businesses, and how can we work with the BOR to accommodate the flows that we need here for tourism reasons in our economy, and what they can do for us as far as trying to figure out what kind of power generation they need, flows for irrigation, and things like that that they're operationally required to try to manage. Initially, I was thrown into the group to try to discuss what flows might do to caddis fly larvae, specifically between the 1 unit generating power water line and the half unit generating power water line. So historically, for years, the 1 unit line, which is only one gate open at the dam, was most of the time the average low flow that you would see. And over time, the caddis flies would colonize based on that consistent water. The years that they were really bad, the water was higher, so they had more real estate to occupy. And the goal of the low flows was to basically have the caddis flies occupy those spaces, but then pull the rug out underneath them, pretty much. So being able to expose them to sunlight, expose them to air, wind, and dry them out. This was a strategy that was completely new. It was a pilot program. The first time we ever tried it, we tried it at the end of August and early September in 2020, basically trying to get a lot of daylight hours, a lot of that sun exposure, and try to desiccate them as best we could. We had different members of the community out in the river. We had biologists from Arizona Game and Fish. We had Clark County Vector Control, members of the Bullhead City Pest Abatement District out in the river, basically to make sure that if there was anything happening in the backwater areas, specifically, fish getting trapped or anything that looked immediately like concerning, I had the cell number of the guy who controls the water flows at the dam. So if we saw something concerning, we were going to put the flows back to normal, back to that 1 unit, 2 unit line. But we monitored it for both those days, and I collected a lot of really quality data suggesting that during those times we would see up to 60 to 70% mortality of caddis fly larvae in those dried out spaces, which is pretty impressive from the point of view of caddis fly. If you're getting dried out for that long, still almost 30% of you made it. So they did some before. So they're tough little buggers. But that was, so basically the decisions to manipulate the flows and do that are not unilateral. It's not just me wanting to turn off the switch or turn off the faucet. It's a multi-stakeholder kind of group that gets together and discusses the implications from multiple perspectives.
Right, and and I can attest to that as well. I was also out there being the eyes and ears for the Fish and Wildlife Service with John Bourne, who's the biologist from there, and we were in close contact monitoring the river that morning, and the flows did not destroy any of the spawning with the fish. It literally had no effect when it comes to there. And there was a lot of eyes and ears on the river that day. And to me, it was a great success because, again, we're not dumping chemicals into the river. And I know in times past that there was stuff put into this river, and this river is just ultra clean. So having some way, in my eyes, I mean, I had a little bit of fear at the beginning that, when you guys said we're gonna drop the level all the way down to here, and I know there was some discussion and some debate, and I guess the right level was come up with between everyone, and I think it was a success because I saw a big reduction in the caddis fly, but not to the point that it's going to hurt the food source for the fish or killing any fish or having the effect on that. So that's one of the big rumors that was going around
during when this program got started, and I'm glad we can clear up kind of what happened out there.
Yeah, and since then we haven't lowered the flows specifically for caddis fly abatement during the day. We've shifted to overnight low flows. So last year, all of my low flows that I submitted requests for and spoke to the committee about were all between the hours of 11 p.m. to 5 in the morning. So now we're in this pattern where we are able to drop the river consecutive days overnight, getting that wind action to dry them out, and to basically have them more habituated to a half unit line for colonization rather than a 1 unit line. So again, lowering that or reducing that real estate that they feel that they can colonize more readily and be more successful. So, and all the temperature readings we took in backwater areas, they were variable, but they weren't, boiling temperatures or anything like that.
No, it was a success for sure.
But yeah, we've continued to try to optimize these low flows to benefit all folks on the river for recreational purposes, and then also for the BOR's perspective. We hold back water at night, and they can push out water in the morning and the evening when people need power. So it's been really great.
Okay, and now we've gone through some of the science part of the caddis fly, the big topic with the dropping of the river and what effect that was going to have. But along with this program, there's a lot of positive things that you guys are doing. And I'd like if we can touch on that and start off with the trout stocking program.
Yeah.
That how this is tied in. I mean, the benefits are, the fishermen do get to fish for these trout. The trout do attract and keep around and offer a food source for the striped bass, which is the big target out here. So maybe you can explain how the trout stocking program works, who's paying for that, as far as which agency, when it's stocked, and why it's stocked and all that. So I'll just turn that over
for
to
sure. So since 2016, the Bullhead City Pest Abatement District, which is a special taxing district that was formed back in 1983 to control for black flies, restarted a trout stocking program that was previously stopped by the federal government. So since 2016, the Bullhead City Pest Abatement District, which is the taxing district that has an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Bullhead City for my position, funds extra trout that are thrown into the river. There are 2 stocking dates that we specifically target for the spring caddis fly emergence, and then there's 3 stocking dates in the fall. So with each stocking date, it's roughly about 3,000 pounds of fish. We've gone between about 20 to maybe 35,000 fish a year, depending on the size of the fish we were able to get in the truck and things like that. But we try to keep these stocking dates secret. I call them secret fish. This guy always asks. But they do have a job for specifically, we want them to eat caddis fly. The Willow Beach Hatchery will stock fish weekly, and that's from fishing licenses, that's federal funds. So that's all good. And I mean, you could catch our fish too. And if you do, please do not release trout.
So and now, yeah, right. So now going back to that, so there is another agency that stocks trout here besides your agency with Bullhead City. So there's 2 stocking programs currently going on in the river at this point. And Matt Schmiel, if I'm correct, is the one runs from Arizona Fish and Game for that stocking through the hatchery. Is that correct?
So his position is through the state, and my understanding is the fish that we could receive are federal money.
Federal,
So, that's the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Gotcha.
But between our 2 agencies, our cap is roughly about 80,000 trout a year. So we put in about 80,000 a year.
I meant to say you work with Matt on your end.
Yeah,
with the state.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I just mixed that up.
Yeah,
and then the one and the fish that come from Willow Beach, that's through the federal program.
Correct. Yeah, that was the hatchery program that was paused, I believe, 2009 maybe, something like that. And then it wasn't until 2015, 2016, where our county commissioner got to talk to John McCain, and John McCain brought those fish back for us. So.
Yep, the Maverick.
Yeah.
Let's move on to fish habitat. I do know that you've done a lot in that regards, and we're out on the water every day and we see the fish habitat. that was put in there, the cement pots with the holes in them. And so maybe you can explain what the purpose of the habitat, that's the structure that's being put in the river, and what the purpose of that is, and then what's in the future for putting more structure in the river.
Yeah, sure. So this section of the river is highly impacted by what's called hydropeaking from the Davis Dam. So hydropeaking, where the water will come up and down so frequently, basically armors the river bottom to a point where all the structure that would have existed is just cleared out so frequently that we're almost devoid of any kind of structure or habitat for fish in most stretches of the main channel. So this program that I started last year, trying to enhance fish habitat, specifically in locations where we have the highest density of caddis flies, was thought of initially to try to create breaks in the water velocity. So basically fish stopping points where they could forage, take a break from the water velocity, go back out, eat caddis flies, and then kind of just intermingle between those two habitat areas. We were able to deploy 90 structures. So these are basically mini reef balls. They're a DIY version of what I came up with flower pots from Lowe's and Home Depot. And we were able to deploy 90 of them in 6 different sites along the bend part of the river, where we see the most of our caddis fly activity. And right now, I've seen some fish occupy those structures periodically during our work. What the consensus is among some of the biologists that I brought in to try to assess the program is that we need more structure. They are quite small. We had to go through a permitting process with Army Corps of Engineers, and also be in compliance with the U.S. Coast Guard in this region for being able to make sure the waterways are navigable, and from the Army Corps' perspective, making sure that we're not putting too much infill into the river and creating a problem as far as hydrology and structures that might be a hazard to boaters. So with all those things considered, we're hoping to continue to build on that and create more structure in those sites specifically, but then also just improve the fishery as a whole in spots that might be advantageous for other fish that are consuming caddis flies.
And are there plans in the near future to put more structure in, and where are you guys at with that?
So right now, the permitting process takes a bit with Army Corps, but the new project manager is really keen on anything that happens in this river. She is excited to hear there are more projects planned. What we're hoping to do with the new updated nationwide permits that the Army Corps of Engineers can issue is that we can have a 3-year program where we have an allocation of habitats that we can place in every year to continue to just incrementally build on these sites that we've already established, and then expand out to other sites as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So for you fly fishermen here, we want to talk about food base, and I'm going to go ahead and let Mike talk about that. He's the expert on that. So this might be some tips here for guys that like to fish with flies, and also what color baits are you going to use, and what style of baits are you going to use?
So a lot of aquatic insect ecologists are avid fly fishermen, specifically for the reason that you know what kind of larval morphologies are going to be expressed by certain favorite foods that insectivorous fish are going to eat. You know their metamorphosis, or the different pupa stages, the different pre-hatch stages, and these are insects that can include caddis flies. The big one that's coming up right now up in Montana, I believe, is the Mother's Day hatch. That's the big one. And then folks in the Rockies, in Colorado and Wyoming also try to match the hatch and with caddis fly emergence patterns. But then there's also mayflies, midges, all that are super abundant in this river. I was mentioning this the other day. The nuisance caddisfly that we have here are a nuisance because of their adult behavior to swarm around homes. But from my trapping and larval samples in the river, we also have a couple species of chironomid non-biting midges, a couple species of mayflies that are also incredibly abundant, just per square foot of river bottom than I've ever seen anywhere else, to be honest with you. And it's a fascinating system to be able to see all of these aquatic insects that exist in what we call a monoculture. So just kind of one species that does really, really well, and we see a couple of species here that do that.
Awesome. Now, you get a lot of different opinions on the health of this river. What kind of, can you grade the health of this river or talk about the health of this river? Because it's so unique here, just out in the middle of the desert. You wouldn't know that something like this exists here. And a lot of people come here and don't know. They think it's just for jet skis, or they think it's just for water skiing, or just for drinking beers on the banks. But there's a lot more going on underneath the surface of the water. So can you touch a little bit on where we're at with the health of the river here?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of my research previous to my position here was using insects as environmental health indicators. So basically, what insects are in an environment can give me an environmental report card. You know, right? Is this an A+, is it a C-, what is it? And certain insects are put into a biotic index to be able to measure that. And some of those insects are the ones that are overabundant here in this river. So one index that I've used previously is called the EPT index, and that's the Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, and Trichoptera index. And those are your mayflies, your stoneflies, and your caddis flies. And basically, the higher percentage of those insects that exist in the aquatic system, the better your water quality. So if I were to grade this part of the river just because of the overabundance of those specific groups, it couldn't get any better, to be honest with you. It'd be hard to see it get any better. And if it does, I got job security for a really long time.
Right.
But no, as far as the health of the river, anything that we do surveys before and after any kind of treatments, whether it's for habitat, for the BTI treatments for black flies, for any kind of sampling or any activities on the river. We're always trying to sample and survey best we can to have a better understanding of what our impacts may have on this already ridiculously high quality ecosystem.
All right, so there you have it. We have a healthy river. Is there anything else that you want to touch on or talk about that we haven't covered regarding the river?
I think we covered pretty much most of what I wanted to include for fish habitat and as far as food base. I guess the only thing I'll add is that this Wednesday, April 13th, from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. at the City Council Chambers, I'll be having a Caddis Fly Community Forum where I'll talk a little bit more at length about the fish habitat, the low flows, and then some other programs that are focused on caddis fly abatement, as well as introduce a new citizen science program that we're hoping to have riverfront residents excited about. So.
Okay. All right, well, I think we're gonna wrap up this part of the interview with Mike, and we're gonna do a little bit of show and tell. He's actually gonna show us from samples, and what are those called that you put in the river?
Substrate samples.
Substrate samples.
Yeah.
So we're gonna look at those, and I'm going to film while Mike talks about that. I hope you enjoyed the interview, so we'll be right back.
Some Hester Dendy plate substrate samplers. So these are samplers that are deployed in different aquatic environments to be able to get a grasp of the invertebrate community that exists there. They can be pulled out at different time points. They can be loaded up with different substrates depending on the critter that you want to study. This one is specific for caddis flies, and you can see a couple of them crawling on there right now. These are some late instar nuisance caddis fly larvae. The species of caddis fly.
So this here, right here, is that's larva, right?
Yep, yeah. Okay. So caddis flies overall are very similar to moths. I can bring them up here on the white tray, it might be a bit better. In that they go through complete metamorphosis, so you have a larval stage, a pupal stage, and an adult stage. And being that they're very closely related to things like moths and butterflies, their subsequent stages look very similar. So larval caddis flies kind of look like underwater caterpillars in a lot of ways. So we have a couple here, and these plates are actually to try to be designed to fit the diameter of what their little silk net retreats would measure up to. So the nuisance caddisfly species here is called Scrimidea fasciatella, and it's in the family Hydropsychidae, which is a net spinning caddisfly. So what these guys do when they're in the water column is cast these silk nets that collect particulate matter in the water column. And what they'll do is feed on the net. Sometimes they'll ingest the entire net and then respin it. But over time, depending on their life stage or the time of year, they'll either be taking in a lot of food or not so much food, and that'll be impacted by water temperature, their metabolism at the time, and then photo period. So these guys are what we would call late instar larvae. So instars are different larval stages that larval insects will exhibit, and every instar in between basically means that they've molted. So what we'll do here is try to unscrew this. Should have loosened this beforehand, so I look like I had it done. There we go. We also have plenty of hitchhikers here. These are quagga mussels, which called the river home for the first time back in 2019.
So is
or 2009. I'm sorry.
2009 when we had the first invasion of the quagga mussels?
Yeah, quagga mussels were first detected up at Lake Mead in 2019, I believe. Or, God, 2019, 2009. And then made their way through to Lake Mojave and then down the entire...
and what effect has that had on the fishery here?
Well, for the ecosystem overall, what quagga mussels do, they're basically small little fish tank filters. So these guys will take in water, filter out the particulate matter within their bodies, and then spit out mostly water that's depleted of any kind of dissolved nutrients or fine organic matter. So what we'll do here is just pull one apart.
Now, has it had a negative effect on fishing or a positive effect, would you say?
So I think it's a complex issue in that since we have so many quagga mussels in the system, they've improved water quality or water clarity to a point where you can see the bottom from 20 feet up, which is unique to the Colorado River historically, because it was supposed to be shallow and muddy, and now we have a deep, channelized, cold, clear water body, which has totally changed the ecology of the river to the point where things like striped bass can do really well. But overall, I think aesthetically, folks have really liked that there's clean water here, or clear water, I should say. Clean and clear is quite different. But one interesting thing about these plate samplers, they kind of get stuck from the silk of the caddis flies. I won't mess this up too much more. We also have a couple that have decided to jump off here. There's a caddis fly larva. We also have a number of amphipods, which resemble freshwater shrimp in a lot of ways. These are also a favorite food of small fish and other predatory insects and things like that. But these substrate samplers are really handy to be able to get a grasp of what developmental stage the caddis fly larvae are in, their abundance in certain parts of the river, and basically trying to time when they might be coming out as adults.
Gotcha.
Since these guys are pretty advanced.
So that here is caddis fly right here,
yep.
Right? This guy here?
Yep, so this guy right here is a caddis fly larva, late stage, looking to find a spot to pupate, and what he'll do is create like a silk retreat around himself on something that's hard, like cobble, or honestly, they'll colonize docks, trash, vegetation, things like that. They'll make a silk case that will cover themselves and protect themselves during pupation, basically like a moth or a butterfly's cocoon. And then once they've reached their critical mass and critical developmental period with their physiology, they'll start to complete metamorphosis and turn into an adult, where they'll emerge from their pupal case, float up to the top of the water, breach, and then come out of the water. So what we try to do is match our trout stockings with those periods of pupal emergence from their case and then emergence as an adult, because that's the most vulnerable period of their life stage. So they're really vulnerable to predation during those times. They're not keen swimmers at all, so they're just at the mercy of the flow, whereas fish can be able to navigate that a bit better. We also see that trout will actually go to the bottom of the river and feed on the cobbles, where we've opened up stomachs and found sand and pupa and things like that. So the closer we try to stock our trout during the pupal stage and adult stage of emergence, the more success we have that we're trying, and more feeding that we've observed previously.
Okay. And are there other fish that feed, whether it's bait fish or other species of fish, that feed on any of the things that are in this tray here?
Yeah, for sure. I guess off the bat, I know that things like panfish, bluegill are stocked in certain habitats to consume quagga mussels, and they're a biological control agent for quagga mussels. The next biggest consumer of caddis flies in the river by far is young stripers. I've seen folks come up with small stripers that have washed up on the shore from some other reason, and we've opened up their stomachs, loaded with insects. So the stripers do their part too, but the trout stocking program is definitely important to supplement the more biological control agents that we can have in the river, and increase that foraging behavior, that foraging that we want to see during those critical times of year.
So would it be fair to say that the food chain in the river starts with what's right here?
Oh, so yeah. I mean, what's really fascinating is that it starts from these guys. So the water clarity that quagga mussels have provided to this river has increased the primary production by multiple folds. The data hadn't been historically collected, so I can't say for sure what factor they've increased, but the clearer the water, the greater the light penetration, the more primary productivity you're going to get out of your system. So more algae and more plants. And a lot of these critters that are important food sources for fish eat algae and eat things that rely on sunlight to grow. So that is the most dynamic aspect of what quagga mussels can do to a system indirectly over time.
And carp, where do they fit in or not fit in this whole chain and ecosystem here? Because I know a lot of people look at it as nuisance. They feed off the bottom, they're digging the bottom. Are they eating any of this, and what effect are they having on the river? What you found with what you do?
Right. So my understanding, there was a bad koi herpes virus outbreak just before quagga mussels came into the system, I think in 2007. Mm-hmm. And that killed back a lot of the carp that we saw up in Lake Mojave and in the lake here, or in the river here. They are by design omnivores, so they'll eat things like algae, detritus, and then they'll incidentally consume insects during that process. So they're not a large consumer of insects, I would say, overall. Okay. We do find them in their stomachs, but overall, the more predatory fish, like your trout, like your stripers, they're more protein based. They want that protein. They need that to continue to grow. Whereas carp are more just generalists. They'll take in what they can get. If they consume some insects, that's great. But if not, they're not really super targeting for those guys.
All right.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add?
I think that's about it. You guys get a close look at what these caddis fly look like before they come out and swarm around the riverbanks.
So in all, the caddis fly is a good thing and a bad thing, but kept in check, it's a good thing. Is that a fair assumption?
So I think for the purposes of the community and for the ecosystem, there's a balance that needs to exist. And what my program is trying to figure out is what is the nuisance tolerance threshold that can be observed from folks that are living on the river, want to enjoy that property, folks that want to recreate out on the river, enjoy fishing, enjoy being on sea-doos and boats and things like that, and what can the ecosystem afford to lose? Because at the end of the day, my priority is keeping that river healthy. And if we can do that while trying to mitigate and suppress these populations, that's a successful program, in my opinion.
All right. All right, Mike. Well, I am so glad
Well,
that we
get some bugs on you too.
yeah, that's fine with me. I'm so glad we had to be able to have this conversation and maybe dispel some of the rumors that are out there, what the program's doing, and how it ties in with fishing and ties in with the health of the river. And you know, I got to say, you're doing a good job from what I see. I'm out there every day. We do communicate from time to time on what's going on, and you bounce things off of me, and I bounce things off of you. And I think that what you're doing is a really good thing. So I want to say thank you.
Oh, no, I appreciate it. Appreciate the support.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And